Coogs house. Houston opens as a two-score favorite this week, and some might call that a bad omen.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. We join the conversation, but you don't know what to say. Tell us in the comments down below. I guess last week I asked this, but I want to ask it again. As we're playing the Beavers this week, what's your favorite Buc-ee's snack? Bucky the Beaver, get it eating Buc-ee's Beaver Nuggets, something I know. Houston plays Oregon State this Friday, but today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We got more on that fun in the first segment. We talk about Houston opening up as big favorites over the Beavs this Friday night. We got a Big 12 weekend to wrap up as Houston was off the schedule, but that doesn't mean big things didn't happen in the conference. That second segment, third and final segment, some recruiting updates and recruiting day updates on the Houston Cougars. Some stuff went their way. Some stuff folks might argue didn't go their way. More in the third and final segment. But first, Houston opens up. It was initially I saw one place at an 8.5 point favorite, 10.5 point favorite, jumped up to 13.5 point favorites before the night was over for Houston over the Oregon State Beavers. Oregon State, you remember, was in the Pac-12 when all the reshuffling happened right before, I guess happened right before the 2023 season. For the 2024 season, Oregon State and Washington State were famously left out. And listen, I was going to go back and talk about how the last time Houston was at this favorite, the last time Houston was at that favorite. But honestly, Houston's been double-digit favorites twice this season, just not against opponents you were that surprised to see it happen with. Let's be honest. Okay, Houston was a 13.5 point favorite for most of the week of the Bayou Bucket against Rice. They also were, you could find a sports book that did FCS, FBS lines. Some places had them at 22.5. Some places had them as high as 28.5 point favorites over Stephen F. Austin. Weirdly, I don't think that one hit, but I get to talk a little bit about this because right now at 13.5 point favorites, my mind goes way back to 2022. Now, Houston was not a double-digit favorite or a two-touchdown favorite a whole lot in 2023 or 2024. Their first 2 years in the Big 12 as a Group of 5 school moving to the Power 4. It was obviously somewhat of a big jump, and I think sportsbooks knew that. But back in 2022, Houston ended their regular season as a 13.5 point favorite against those Tulsa Golden Hurricanes, which Dana Holgorsen, these two Cougars, famously did not win. They lost that game 37-30. Look, in the American that year, Houston was 10 or more point favorites 4 different times. They covered against Navy and East Carolina. Didn't cover, was a giant spread of 17.5 against South Florida that season. And so my mind weirdly is back into that mode. And I don't know if that's because, we're at a different stage in the rebuild than we were in 2023 and 4, or if I just wasn't surprised to see big spreads against Rice and Stephen F. Austin necessarily. While obviously I have respect for those programs, Houston's a better spot, right? This week I see Houston as a 13.5 point favorite, and I get hesitant. I mean, Malik Murphy, decent quarterback, start off at Texas, spent a year at Duke. He did play in that game where Houston played Texas back in 2023 and injured Quinn Ewers. Houston should have won that game. That's not today's episode, obviously, but Malik Murphy played in that one, so Houston's seen him before. Trent Bray is a coach that's now 5-11 after getting beat down by Oregon over the weekend, and he's a player's coach. I could very much see a play for our coach kind of mentality. We talked last week in a way too early preview with Christian Raw of the Pac-12 Daily Podcast, and Christian pointed out they're talking about firing him in circles around that team, and you know, it's passing week 4. That's a big week for coaches that have been on the hot seat to start the year, because after week 4, you lose the ability to redshirt if you've played in all 4 games, or game 4, I should say. And thus, you're looking at like, if you got rid of your coach, your kids couldn't just sit out the rest of the season as a form of protest or keeping their eligibility or whatever. So you could see a lot of heads roll following that Monday. And so in this final homestand of sorts, it's in Corvallis. Could his players like put up a big fight for him, right? Or something like that. I like the running back Anthony Hankerson. In watching some stuff on YouTube, I hadn't broken it down quite like I have in the past, because some of these games are kind of hard to figure out. But David Wells Jr., Carson Boshema, a couple receivers I like as well. But I think Houston, even if it's, you know, a scary spread, and that 13.5 points makes you feel like it's almost like a lose-lose. Like you either, you know, win by a couple touchdowns, everyone tells you you're supposed to, or something doesn't happen like that and you go south, and suddenly it's like, oh my God, how'd you blow that one, right? It feels like it's bordering on that against Oregon State this week. I do think Houston shows up coming off of a bye week. Friday night. They played on Fridays before. They understand how to outline a game week for a Friday night. While it's really late local time, you got plenty of time to adjust with the bye week the week before. I don't think Houston's going to be in danger of looking ahead, like some people seem to think with the Tech game on the horizon and all of that. I think very much in the here and now. I think it's kind of a good thing Fritz and his company does as a coaching staff, frankly, to stay very much in the present. Frankly, in a year, we could look ahead to future recruiting classes and stuff like that, right? 2026 is a great year. They're very much about the here, the present, the now. It's kind of been their motto for a lot of the, talking about like the 2025 Houston Cougars has been their motto for a long time now. I think Houston wins this one by closer to 3 touchdowns. Hang on to my official predictions yet. I want to watch a little bit more video, but I think Houston's front on both sides. It's been a while since we can say that, but both sides of the ball, I think Houston's front is just going to be too much. Oregon State has a guy that is listed at 292 at center, and he's really good. I want to give Van Wells a shout out there as a center. He's like, I could see him getting drafted, even though he is 6'2", 295 or 292, whatever he is. And it probably means he's closer to 285, whatever, right? But even as an undersized guy playing center, he's really talented. He's got great feet and hands, and he's tough as an ox, or tough as nails, strong as an ox. That's two sayings put together. I think Carlos Allen's just better. I think Carlos Allen beats him, and that's kind of the only spot that you could argue they've had an advantage at any point in any game along their offensive lines at center. Again, I think Ben Wells is good. Carlos Allen's been playing so well as of late. He's looked like an NFL caliber defensive lineman. I expect that to continue. No reason for it not to continue as well. Never mind like Khalil Lafoe and some of the other guys along the D-line have been playing fantastic as well. I think the linebackers, that kind of hybrid spot with LaTrevion McCutcheon, Trey is going to dominate, I think, in this game too. Really looking forward to seeing him make some plays. On the inverse, I think Houston's going to be able to run the ball against the Oregon State front. I get the Oregon State D linemen are okay. They got a couple guys that do pretty well in terms of holding up their gaps, but their linebackers are kind of the weak point of their defense. And I feel like that's going to open up things for like Dean Connors, and hopefully get Jamarian Burnett back, and Stacy Sneed and Connor Wickman even getting after it, running the football. I also think you can get some RPO kind of stuff, depending on how much you want to show, and get Tanner Kojal involved with some of the stuff right behind that, where if the linebackers want to come play the run, they get screwed because they have a 6'8" beast behind them playing tight end. I feel like this is a game that Houston's got enough ways to exploit what Oregon State doesn't do well, that line feels fairly safe to me. And I feel, frankly, like it's a good game to get back into the rhythm and routine. You have game Friday night, obviously a long trip back on Saturday, but then you get into a normal game week before you get to Tech the following week after. I think things are shaping up well for the Houston Cougars against Oregon State. Now, we'll be talking to a couple people this week to kind of get the Oregon State perspective, and I understand that they're Division I football players and they practice too, and I think that playing to keep their coach's job is a big deal here, and I'm interested to hear more from them, both on the show and in messages like that throughout the week. leading up to it, so you may get my vibe on what those conversations sound like too. How strong they think that is. Look, UCLA and Virginia Tech have already cut ties with their coach. They said, screw this redshirt rule or whatever. Like, we just got to get rid of these guys. And so it feels like that hot button thing for guys that were on the hot seat. And I understand that, he took a job that was in a bad spot, and it's only been a year and not even a half as far as coaching them has gone. But 5-11 with a not so difficult schedule in either season, and one of those five is an FCS school. I, man, anyway, we're going to talk to them more about it over there throughout the week. So I'll let the folks that know Oregon State better talk to you about it as well. I want to talk some about the Big 12's weekend that was, look at a little bit at the past tense. But before we get to all of that, I do want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by the Game Cap. I got one on. Now, listen, quick question. Football fans, go back to 1980s. We're thinking Andre Ware. We're thinking Houston Cougar football, top of the Southwestern Conference, doing big things. If you go back in time, sit front row at the biggest game you can think of. What hat do you have on? Yes, I said that exactly like I wanted to say it. What hat do you have on? These aren't just hats. They're the game. For me, I'd be rocking the game hat as I got on right here on my dome for the video audience. For the folks at home listening on audio, it says U of H. It's got the 3-bar. I got the little trucker fit going, actually, which makes me feel really like I'm from the 80s. Honestly, it's more to let my head breathe a little hot. But these are not just hats. The breathability is nice, though. The same vintage style that was worn back in those 80s, nice. And guess what? They go for the same price they did back then. Use code LOCKED ON. Get your vintage cap for $16.99. It's a price from the 90s, folks. $16.99. Head to thegamecaps.com. That's thegamecaps.com. Grab your favorite team's classic bar or retro circle design. Use code LOCKED ON for an exclusive discount because legends wear the game. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here. It was a big weekend for the Big 12. Some big results. The biggest of which, as far as the national audience is concerned, is Texas Tech beating Utah. Now, with Iowa State idle this weekend, these were the two top Big 12 teams in action, and Texas Tech put a thumping on by the end of it. Baron Morton, starting quarterback, went out. Talks about him getting Wally pipped and Will Hammond stuff coming out. I watched this one pretty closely, mostly because Tech is the next Big 12 opponent for Houston. It was a game that was on. I also watched some Oregon and Oregon State, but that ended up being a little bit more of a blowout a little bit earlier. And honestly, look, I watched this game and I tweeted out, there is no one I see on Houston's schedule that Houston cannot beat, right? Like there's no one that's going to take a miracle into this and that. No one on the schedule is like that. However, I'll admit, I watched that game happen and thought Tech looked pretty good. By the end of it, the Hammond guy raised an interesting question. Do you go with the Wally Pipp theory and play Hammond as the better quarterback option? Do you stick with Baron Morton? Do you think that Will Hammond played better because that's what Utah, not what Utah game planned for? Is his ceiling higher? Whose floor is higher? Which is more important? That's all stuff for them to figure out in Lubbock. That ain't my problem, right? I also have to admit that by the end of the game, I was thinking a lot about last college football season, not necessarily because of Texas Tech, although Utah was involved, but early in that season, we saw Oklahoma State hosting Utah, and it was the 2023 runner-up in the Big 12, Oklahoma State, hosting the Pac-12 defending champion that no longer had anything to defend because the Pac-12 was gone in Utah. And Oklahoma State had beaten Arkansas, and Utah had already beaten Baylor, and it was technically a non-conference matchup earlier in the season. And the thought was that when Utah won that game in Stillwater, that they are going to come in and run this whole conference. And Oklahoma State now has an uphill battle. They still have this path to Arlington and so on and so forth. And Oklahoma State went on to not win a Big 12 game the rest of that season. Haven't since, frankly. And Utah still lacks a conference counter, an official conference win at home. Houston beat Utah last season. Look, the only win Utah has in the Big 12 since that game is a road win against UCF, and they fired their coach the next day. UCF did, and I look at this and say, like, I think it's still as good as they looked on Saturday and as dominant as the performance that was. We just said that a year ago about Utah, and we saw how that year went. And I'm not saying it's going to go that far south for Tech. Tech has invested a lot in their college football program, as anyone and everyone would like to, right? Um, I just look at it like, okay, it's September. There was a point in that game for 2.5 quarters where it felt like really close. Uh, and then it didn't for a second. Let's pump the brakes for a second. Meanwhile, on the inverse, like, I think TCU also looks good. We talk about Iowa State a lot. I like Iowa State as a program. Campbell's a good coach, but like TCU, and for whatever you think about Sonny Dykes, I don't need to go on what I think about Sonny Dykes. They seem to be winning games. Second powerful win in the non-conference. Um, whatever you think about North Carolina, I guess we'll get to them in a second too. It feels like Hoover and McAllister have a real connection for them. They beat SMU over the weekend in much more dominant fashion than Baylor did, with a come from behind victory in overtime. Central Florida beat Carolina. Scott Frost, I don't think the whole freezing over thing is working necessarily, but they beat Bill Belichick in a great non-conference win for the Big 12 as well. And I leave the weekend as all schools head into conference play, or most schools are heading into conference play. I guess obviously Houston playing Oregon State, having already played Colorado. The Big 12 is 6-1 against the ACC, 2-2 against the Big 10, and while they are 0-3 against the SEC, Arizona State probably should have beaten Mississippi State and couldn't quite close it out at the buzzer on the road. And Kansas did get up early on Missouri. Baylor did the Baylor thing, but that's how that goes sometimes too. The only Big 12 loss to the ACC was a Georgia Tech win over Colorado. Georgia Tech gave Georgia all they could handle last season. And the two losses to the Big 10 were Oklahoma State and Cincinnati. Both of them may fire the coaches in the next 4 or 5 days, maybe the next couple of weeks, if not the next couple of months. Those coaches are done at those programs, and that's the Big 10 wins over the Big 12 this season. And even when you add in Notre Dame wins to some of these other teams, because Notre Dame's 0-3 and has played the other three power conferences, that still leaves the Big 12 at second in wins against other power conferences thus far this season. They also rank second in losses to group of six, and least groups of losses to group of six schools amongst the Power Four conferences. And look, there's a big swing in the rankings here as far as conference is going to go. Miami and Florida State are both ACC schools, both in the top 10. They do play each other in a couple weeks. October 4th, actually, the same day that Houston plays Texas Tech. And Florida State still in the top 10. They had a couple layup games since beating Alabama on national TV, but other people from them have lost too. So we get to see those two teams play it out. So theoretically, one ACC team will probably be in the top 10 after that one. I don't imagine the other one to stay in the top 10. I just look at this as we talk about it going into it in the non-conference era for the Big 12. It was a really, really strong showing in non-conference football by and large for the Big 12. Would winning one or two or all three of those SEC games have been nice? Yes, it would have, Baylor. Thank you. Would have been nice. But by and large, really strong showing out of these Big 12 schools in their non-conference Power 4 opponents. Technically, for what it's worth, Oregon State was supposed to be a non-conference Power 5 opponent back when it got scheduled for Houston. They were supposed to be getting on the party here for a second. And while for Houston's sake and getting a win, I don't mind that Oregon's at a down part of their program because of what happened. What happened does suck. I don't want to act like it doesn't, but I'll take wins where you can find them. Houston's got to go work hard and take one this week. I think that's a good sign for the Big 12. And as a Houston fan, when you'd been left out of the big Power 4, Power 5 conference party for so long, obviously the Big 12 is always the one you wanted, but it makes you feel good about the one you got into, right? That it's the one doing so much better right now as it stands, right? I mean, the ACC is far. I mean, it has two great teams in it, and the rest of them ain't. Right? SMU might be third. They lost two Big 12 teams in the non-conference. Right? Clemson might be, and they almost lost to Troy. Right? Like the ACC's pretty far behind this thing, and so it makes you feel good about where you're at enjoying the Big 12, and where the conference is at as far as the future of college football goes. It feels like you can't leave out the Big 12 right now, and that's interesting. So we look at like end of year, how many bids do you get, how many bids don't, etc. Like the Big 12 is making a pretty strong push to get a second bid in the college football playoff, especially in a year where like there might be talk about a second group of five school. There's just so many good group of five schools out there right now. I mean, North Texas is 4-0. What? Right? Lots of options out there, right? So be checking in on that as things unfold. Obviously, that's mostly wrapped up at this point, though. So we'll see how rankings come out as they go. The AP polls are out, obviously, but I just mean as Big 12 schools continue to climb them over the course of the season, we'll be following the Big 12 as Houston Cougar fans, the Houston Cougar eye on it very, very closely. Now, hoops recruiting, big news of the weekend. Yes, one might have gotten away, but one might not. And I want to talk about that in 1 second. Before we get too far, though, today's show is brought to you, as mentioned, by our buddies over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because NFL season's here. Someone should wake up the Houston Texans and tell them. FanDuel's make sure that you get ready for kickoff with can't-miss offers. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. If your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to bet across the app. If you think Houston is going to score a touchdown, the Texans, that is, power to you. If you can figure out who it's going to be, you can go to FanDuel and make some money on that action. If you can figure out what the score is going to be, go make some money on that action. If you figure out who they're going to draft first pick overall, because it feels like that's what the Houston Texans are bound to do, find some action on it at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. If you are ready to play, download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's show is also brought to you by our buddies at Square. Now, listen, this episode is brought to you by Square because that's your favorite neighborhood spot. They run on Square. There are certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home. Whether it's a local sports bar packed on game days, coffee shop who knows your order by heart, corner delis, whatever the case may be, these are places that bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood comes alive. I'm going to recommend Conchinita and Company. They use Squarespace to thrive as well. It's a pop-up concept started back in 2016. Almost 10 years later, standalone restaurant, second pop-up, and new revenue, all bootstrapping efforts by the Elizondo family at Conchinita. Now go check them out. They use Square as well, just like everyone, keeping your neighborhood alive. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. Before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spots. You're going to be happy you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. All right, recruiting updates. The Houston Cougars. O'Neal DeLancey took his unofficial visit over the weekend, and man, he looked happy. I should point out he brought family members. He brought his basketball trainer. They went and checked out the Houston Cougars, and it feels like they enjoyed their visit. Now, the 6'2 guard is a 2027 prospect, a top 30 prospect on every recruiting board out there. Heading into his junior year, he's decided to go to Montverde Academy, which he publicly announced just 2 days after receiving his Houston offer in July. Things have shot up the charts for this guy. He plays for Florida Rebels in AAU Nike EYBL circuit. And I would point out, I guess, that the 16 under version of that for folks that are being very persnickety about what level is what. EYBL is officially the highest one Nike. I think it's technically the 16 EYBL or something like that, right? But I would point out, though, that's the age-appropriate one. And the Florida Rebels have two other players on the perimeter, also in the top 75. point guard Caden Daughtry and wing Carson Crawford, both really talented, and it's a lot of Florida kids, and really really talented. A lot of basketball academies in Florida right now. Even with all that talent around him, O'Neal DeLancey managed to average 21.7 points per game, 5.7 assists per game, and shoot nearly 40% from three in Nike EYBL events, including Peach Jam. Really, really impressive stat lines. I loved watching the stuff on YouTube though. After I saw the visit pictures to kind of get an idea of what this guy was, like just the epitome of tough shot maker. Shoots it off the bounce, coming off screens, decent mid-range pull-ups, attacks the rim pretty well. Had a few dunks. I think he's going to be much more above the rim as he gets older. Certainly has the like mentality of attacking the rim to go for a dunk. He just finished his sophomore year, heading into his junior year. I think he's getting more and more springy as he gets older. Very competitive. The kind of guy that talks the right kind of trash after he makes a big bucket and he like stares and whatever. And like he's going to have, if he's choosing his Houston Cougars, I should point out, he will have the kind of moments that like hits a big shot, looks at the student section, just flexes. Like he's like that kind of like energy at all times, like just super competitive. Wants everyone to know when he makes it, like a big key kind of moment. And it's not like trashy garbage talk or whatever. Like it's really it's pretty momentum swinging. It's uplifting his teammates. Like we got this kind of stuff. It's impressive. Love how competitive the guy was in the video I got to watch of him on YouTube. Really, really impressed. And Houston's pretty high on him. A couple coaches, Econom and Kellen Sampson, in his pictures as well. He'd be a big get, guys. 6'2" guard with a lot of skill, a lot of upside, a lot of skill. And it's always great to have it. Just if you can find a guard with some skill and that is really competitive, you can do a lot of things. The other big recruiting news of the weekend for the Houston Cougars men's basketball program was that legacy product Aziz Olajuwon did not choose the Houston Cougars, and Aziz, son of Hakeem Olajuwon, decided to go to Stanford. Verbally committed to Stanford this weekend. And I should point out, first and foremost, really happy for Aziz and the Olajuwon family. Great school, great education, obviously at Stanford. And for what it's worth, ACC basketball now. It's strong basketball too. Happy for him. Happy for a Houston high school basketball player that's getting to play at the highest or one of the highest levels of college basketball, right? Like that's all good news. That's all good things. It helps. There's also Akeem's sons were like, hey, that's also cool to see happen, right? But a lot of people are like upset about Houston not landing him over the weekend. And that feels entirely because of the legacy aspect of this. I don't think that Houston fans would be upset about Aziz not committing to Houston if his last name were not Olajuwon. If it was just a different 4-star prospect on the wing at 6'7" with the same skills and attributes, I don't think there'd be even if it was from the city of Houston, I don't think there'd be a soul this upset because Houston's proven they know what they're doing. And look, I get the legacy thing is a thing people thought was like, it's in the bag, but I also think that Houston's got between like Bryson Howard and Ralph Scott and some other big time wing options out there that have Houston pretty high on their respective lists. I think Houston's going to continue to do just fine as they have done the last several years. We've seen Houston really turn a corner the last 4 or 5 years. We're getting in the mix with top prospects kind of whenever they need to. Obviously, class 2025 is one of the greatest of all time, but they're doing okay. And so we need to trust the process there a little bit. And as far as people just being upset about the idea of a legacy getting away anyway, look, like Michael Jordan's kids did not go to North Carolina. Shaq had a kid at Texas Southern, a daughter at Florida, another daughter at Texas Southern. The kid that ended up at LSU technically started off at UCLA. Shaq's kid, right? Carmelo Anthony's son, Cayenne Anthony, did end up at Syracuse, but other top prospect in the same class, Elijah Arenas, is at USC, which is a rival of his dad, Gilbert Arenas' alma mater, Arizona. For every pair of Boozer twins out there, there's a Dylan and Ron Harper or DJ and DeJuan Wagner. And like, I just think that that's not as common as people want to make it out to be. And further, I want to make it like very, very clear that every kid's recruiting process, every kid's decision is much more personal than like, well, your dad went to this school, right? Is it cool to see your dad's jersey up in the in the rafters? Yes. Is it cool to stay home and play in the city you grew up in? Absolutely. Is there more to it? Yes, a lot more to it. Aziz is an incredibly talented wing, really high motor. I don't think of this decision he made as some whiff by Houston necessarily, and I think that if the only thing you were hoping for is that to get another Olajuwon, hate to spoil the pooch for you, but they don't play the same position. They ain't the same size, and I wish Aziz all the luck in the world. I think Akeem's a top 10, if not higher, guy all time in the history of the sports. I don't know that Aziz is going to do that. So like, they're just different, and I don't think it's crazy to be not like more happy for Aziz than I am upset about anything else. And that's the way it goes. Houston's going to do fine, class 2026. Have faith. Keep the focus. This has been Locked On Cougs, episode of Locked On Cougs presented by FanDuel. Thank you for checking us out today. Hit subscribe to the bus. You know we go live. We're doing things on Oregon State, getting ready for the Oregon State game all week long. So make sure you tune in each day for more to hit up to Corvallis to beat the Beavers on Friday. Got some people coming on the show, so we're hoping to talk about them about that one as well. I'll be live post game too, as late as that is. It's really gonna be so late. It's gonna be early technically, so make sure you check that out when it comes. Big 12 squad each Thursday afternoon. We also just started, so new that we didn't play last weekend, so it wasn't quite the biggest deal, but we're doing a Sunday morning recap show as well. It goes live at 11 local time, so check out that each week, breaking down biggest games from the day before. So check us out. Locked On is everywhere, folks. Locked On Prime and Locked On Podcast. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.